Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another fabulous episode of Exploring the Paranormal. I have an amazing guest today. Super excited to bring him on. So I'm not going to do any of my typical babbling. I'm going to bring him right on board and introduce him. So let's welcome Jeff to the show. Welcome to the show, Jeff. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Heather. What a great intro. And I'm excited about doing your show with you today.
Oh, thank you so much. I get so many compliments on that intro. I was worried about it when I first made it.
No, it works. It works.
It does, especially with what I do. And I know today's show is a little bit different, even though I do have some questions that kind of tend to go along my lines of the paranormal. But you are, is it the great-grandson or great-great-grandson of H.H. Holmes?
Two greats, my grandfather's grandfather.
Okay. Perfect. What was it like growing up knowing that?
Well, that's what, and that's one of the reasons I was excited about coming on your show today with your background and education. You know, there's a lot of books about H.H. Holmes now, nonfiction pieces from authors doing their best trying to come up with the real story. My book was more about waking up one day, Heather, at 40 and suddenly realizing where I came from, but also knowing that I recognized a difference all my life that suddenly made a lot of sense. Not that I wanted to kill anyone, anything like that. You'll know those things, but just different impulses, instincts, and feelings about the things we humans are supposed to have. Yeah. And it all made a lot of sense. So I wanted to write a book more about that waking up one day with that in my background. And then as the story got deeper and deeper, Heather, it started growing bigger and bigger. And finally, you know, at one stage, we're talking about him being Jack the Ripper. And where I had just started out having it wanted to be about going fishing with my grandfather and him finally telling me the truth about who we were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's amazing how stories can evolve like that. And I mean, I've watched ever since I was actually introduced to your research from American Ripper, which I think was such an amazing show. And it's interesting, the connection that you found there between Jack the Ripper. Has that evolved anymore, or is it still kind of where it was when the show aired?
You know, I'm glad you watched American Ripper. It was a fantastic experience for me to have a mini series like that, and the people that I got to work with, my co-host Amaryllis Fox, an ex-CIA analyst and a real tough chick. We still talk all the time. She went on and married a Kennedy, so she's doing just great, and 2 kids. So that was fun. That was a lot of fun to do. And history, to their credit, jumped right in where a lot of people thought it was silly, my idea that he could have been Jack the Ripper. History wanted to give it a chance. And that those first 7 episodes were us in London and all those things. And I thought they did a great job. Their historical recreations with the actors they used were awesome. I still watch it. And but then at the end, we got into that exhumation thing, actually digging up a grave. And it turned a new leaf, the show, and got deeper and deeper, and pun intended, into the crazy story that is H.H. Holmes.
Yeah, the story is just amazing. And when that connection with Jack the Ripper, it was like, you even had me thinking, I'm like, wow, that makes sense.
Well, you know, and it wasn't I didn't come up with the idea first. There were some great investigators in Pennsylvania who contacted me once they knew I was realized I was writing my book. And they wanted to tell me about the research they'd done over the years, and they had some good information. And the samples they provided, we used handwriting, which I'd used before. I used to practice law in California, and I'd used handwriting in trials as evidence, trying to establish a guilt or innocence. So. And I knew the direction they had gone was never going to work with, when you go into Jack the Ripper, Heather, we're talking about over 1 billion people around the world know what that phrase means.
Yeah.
And they've all been given ideas from previous authors or historians about suspects and possibilities. And it's something Hollywood's used to their advantage for 75 years now, I guess. Yeah. And every year they come out with a new movie, it seems like.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those ongoing topics.
Yeah. And I knew the direction they were going was never going to work, but I had some connections with people at the Department of Justice about, because they use handwriting now a lot about in their cases. The FBI does, the CIA does, the post office uses handwriting comparisons. But they'd actually gone out and hired a group of scientists at the University of Buffalo.
Okay.
And they created a computer program called Cedar Fox, which I discussed on my TED Talk, which was, almost over 10 years ago now. But I discussed it at the TED, and on that talk, I explained how I'd gone to these scientists, how they'd eagerly volunteered to run the samples with the Dear Boss letter, the famous letter from Jack the Ripper, and where the phrase Jack the Ripper was coined, and the letter that many had thought was a journalistic hoax. But it got a little too close to the one victim's cause of death, the knife slash, removal of a piece of ear, all those things, and that journalistic hoax thing got a little strange. So they jumped in. They took the samples from my ancestor's handwriting, some of his verified stuff, and they ran it against Dear Boss, and they came back with a number at 98%.
Ooh.
Which, Heather, to put it into perspective for you and your listeners, if you ran 2 pieces of your handwriting right now, I doubt you'd get 98% on that computer program.
Right.
And so I know, wow, this is, and then they assured me if we help them up the font into 19th century stuff, up the program, they could get even higher with this. And I was thinking, wow, this has the chance to be groundbreaking. And history was excited about telling that story, and so we did American Ripper.
Oh, yeah, that, like I said, it was a great series, and I absolutely loved it. I've watched it several times, and each time I watch it, I take away something new. So it's always even though it's a tough topic for some people, it is a fun series.
Funny you bring that up, because every time I watch it, something new comes up for me too.
It's all about the research. You never know what you're going to find. And that's why I always tell people to, even with paranormal investigations, always review your evidence more than once, because you never know what you might have missed the first time. So, yeah. And I'm so sorry. My son actually fell asleep on the couch next to me, so I'm trying to wake him up. He started snoring.
No, go ahead. I don't mind.
No, it's fine. It's just every once in a while you'll hear a loud snore, and it's like I'll throw something at him to try to wake him up. So I apologize for that. It's what he gets for being up too late playing computers.
That happens.
I know, exactly. But recently, you had mentioned that you had some new breakthroughs and some exciting news in your research.
That last episode of American Ripper was, and you know what, before we jump into that exhumation of the grave, I want to give History Channel credit. They were amazing to work with. They jumped in, agreed to work with me on a concept and a theory I'd had for a long time, that Holmes had not been executed, that he had escaped prison, and family legend and lore was that he had lived the remainder of his life out in California in the Bay Area. even having his initial wife, the legal wife, move out there, who I met, my great grandmother Clara, who was living in across from the Sacramento River from where I went to school. So it was all kind of a strange connection. And history was excited about doing that, and they're the only network around that would have agreed to take that shot. You know, when you think back and their Amelia Earhart story and the trouble they got into with that, they're to be given credit. So they agreed to fund the project, which was very, very expensive. We had to hire lawyers. We had to get a judge to give us a court order for the exhumation. The Catholic Church had to agree. My relatives had to all consent. It was an amazing process for their lawyers to go through, and they did it. And then when we started digging, Heather, we soon discovered there was more than one grave. So we had to go back to the judge with the lawyers and get another order and an amendment to that. And then when we started digging around the two graves, the walls started collapsing. So we had to hire an engineering crew to come in and shore everything up, because there were bodies on each side of us that we could not. The judge had made it perfectly clear, you are not to interrupt those graves. So it was, history did a great job with all that. And, you know, at the end, when the exhumation came up, the University of Pennsylvania was the court-appointed archaeologist, anthropologist, the two scientists from their museum there who were fun to work with. You can go wake them up if you want. And great time working with them. They loved working with Amaryllis, the CIA analyst. And I've got some great stories about, you know, as we're digging, you know, the grave is, we get down to the coffins, and it gets very eerie, spooky, scary stuff, you know. And I'm not usually like that, but I was spooked. And she's like, she jumps right down and she starts digging away with the archaeologists, and it was fun to watch. So we got through the first grave, and then we found a bodiless coffin. Yeah, and not like the one. Yeah, full of a clay-like material, and one that wasn't like what the newspapers had recounted much at all back in the 1896 period. So we dug through that. We're shocked to see there was no body in this box. We got the judge's consent. We moved over, dug down 2 feet deeper, and found the concrete sarcophagus that everyone wants to talk about. Yeah. This huge block of concrete with lumber, you know, shoring it up. We broke it open, and lo and behold, there's a body in the box with very intact for over 121 years then. In 2017, we dug it up on the show. And you got to remember, we're digging a grave. The scientists are working their archaeological exploration of their lifetimes.
Right.
The production crew for history is trying to come up with the final episode, and they're running out of time. It was chaos. It was pure chaos. And I'm sitting there scratching my head trying to figure out what's going on through all this, realizing, and I think maybe I was the only one at the time, that this wasn't just a dig for artifacts. This wasn't like us going out to Kansas and digging for Native American Indian remains at an old site. This was probably a crime scene. This was, if my theory held true, this was probably a homicide, a murder. And we needed to have someone there managing the dig who had experience with that thing. And we didn't have that there. Right. So we pulled the body up, took it back to the lab at the UPenn. They were going to do some DNA. The judge had ordered DNA testing You know, that's the magic phrase now on television and true crime, and you know
Yep.
that. You
Oh
know
yeah.
that. I think DNA is in every true crime show. There is every sentence of the show.
Yep.
And I was there, and the scientists were excited about the body. They'd cleaned it up. It's on the table. They have me come in. They're filming away, and they're going to take a sample of my blood. We've got a lab in London, the famous King's College, the only one that wanted to do this test, which was strange enough in essence right then. I was thinking, why wouldn't all the DNA labs in America want to do this test in comparison? You know, this is something like testing dinosaurs. You know how like when you're standing at Albertsons and you're waiting to check out, or Safeway, you got the National Geographic magazines there, and they're talking about dinosaur DNA and discovering the truth about. And I'm thinking, well, this is going to be a piece of cake, you know. So they were there, and the King's College is directing them what sample they want of the body. I thought they'd want some of the teeth. I thought they'd want mustache. We had the full mustache on the body. We had brain material still in the skull after 121 years. His upper clothes, the pants were gone. Everybody had theories about that, and then the boots, you know, and all that. So, and they said no. They wanted us to roll the skull over and there's a pocket of bone, osseous, at the back of your skull, and they had the scientists who were experts at this. It's what they do for a living. And they had this diamond drill bit, and the crew's filming away, and the director's excited, and history's just excited about showing it. And they pull up a sample with this diamond drill bit, and King's College says, well, get us that, get the DNA from Jeff's blood, and we'll have this back to you in 3 to 5 days, and we're convinced if that's his great-great-grandfather, it'll be a direct match. So I was thinking, well, I guess that's going to be it. My theory is going to come to a crashing halt. And how do you argue with DNA? I mean, that's what we have now in forensic science. So 5 days later, the scientists have no word. A week later, no word. A month later, no word. 2 months later, no word. And then everyone starts worrying about finishing the show up with what we're supposed to use. Well, why isn't the DNA coming back a direct match? After all, I mean, I am his great-great-grandson, and if that's him, if he was the one hung that day at Moyamensing prison, the DNA is going to be a direct match. That's what I won't mention their name on your show, but that's what big corporations do for livings, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that's what they use to do it. So the scientists were starting to get frustrated. History was getting frustrated. I called and said, and they said, we're having trouble. We're having trouble coming back with results that work. We're ready to give up on DNA. I said, what do you mean give up? What do you mean give up? Well, we can't get any results back. They're inconclusive was the word they kept using. Never that they weren't a match.
Right.
So me being the old lawyer, I started considering, I'd love to have this right now in trial at court with cross-examinations of UPenn scientists about DNA. But, I couldn't do that. History wanted out of the show. They had put 8 episodes in. They'd spent a fortune on the exhumation and the lawyers and everyone involved, and they wanted out. And they were, to be fair, they truly believed it was H.H. Holmes.
Yeah, that's interesting. And like you said, DNA says it all. And I would be questioning it too if they weren't giving me answers right away, because if it was a direct match, cut and dry, here's your answer. But it almost sounds like they were trying to make the sample match you.
That's what it looks like now. But I still think they believed it was. They were just thinking maybe, you know what? They came up with a rationalization, Heather, that your listeners may appreciate. They started calling the DNA sample ancient, quote unquote. And I went, wait, ancient? I mean, we know the man. We know where he was supposedly executed. We know he was buried in 3 days later.
Right.
We know, the bloodline, and DNA should just put this thing to bed. And then I come across an interview they do with Rolling Stone magazine and the Associated Press, how they'd given up on DNA, that they'd use teeth to identify the body. Okay, all right. And then I was there in the room when we saw the conclusion to the show, which went a little farther than the information they had, and that's as much as I'll go into that. Anybody watching the end of American Ripper and the conclusion that history put up will quickly see what I mean. But the teeth in the skull were perfect. I mean, there were an amazing set of teeth for this 35-year-old doctor, right? I mean, he was missing some molars, but they were generally pretty good. And we had this test. We had this physical examination. See, when the deeper you go into this story, Heather, the more it evolves. And that's why I'm hoping that history one day will decide, you know what, we need to take a second look at that thing. We need to take let's be fair with the American public and history, and let's see if we can get this right this second time, but we'll see. So there was a physical examination, which lo and behold includes a dental impression of his teeth, supposedly his teeth, which anyone looking at can see are a perfect match with the teeth we dug up. I'll be the first to admit, I said, it's a perfect match. How can I argue with that? Those teeth, same teeth missing, the same misformations, all those things that a dentist would immediately recognize.
Right.
But there was never any mention how it was, where it was taken, when they were taken, or of whom they were taken in the physical examination, which for an ex-criminal lawyer is strange. You start worrying about, wait a minute, I got to authenticate this piece of evidence that they want to end the case with. They got to verify who took these, of what. And so I started digging deeper and deeper. The scientists then admitted that they'd done CT scans on the body of a man that had been hung by the neck until dead, and 2 prison physicians had mentioned in their report that the neck was broken, even the exact break between which exact vertebra.
Right.
And there was no evidence of that, which every physician I've asked for says is highly unlikely. It's called a hangman's break. That's what it's actually called.
Right.
And nothing indicating that. And then we started getting call-ins on shows like yours from people who had worked the dental field saying, you guys got to check those dental impressions out. They're strange. They're very different. And they may be something that breaks this whole thing wide open. So right now we've got a dental team working on that very issue right now. And I know I've talked way over here. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine.
But and then as soon as they come back to me with the results they assure me are true, I'm going to make a trip to Philadelphia. I'm going to go see the judge who issued his final say about that we had met with all his requirements, that we had identified the body, that it was H.H. Holmes, and let's all move on. Well, I'm going to show him these results. I'm going to show the Catholic Church the results, who were part of the exhumation there at
Mhm.
Holy Cross Cemetery, who had insisted, Heather,
Mhm.
that if we found that it wasn't Holmes or that it was unidentifiable,
Mhm.
that I was responsible for marking that grave of the poor unfortunate that was in the grave that had sat
Mhm.
there for 121 years.
Right.
And then we had dug up even. And they wanted that grave marked. So I'm going to go back and talk to them. I'm going to talk to the judge. I'm going to talk with the ABC, NBC, CBS, who all
Mhm.
said on national television that this was Holmes, that the DNA and the dental records prove it so, and this was a hoax, a rumor, and this story has no teeth, pun intended. Pun intended.
Exactly.
And that's where I'm at right now. You're one of the first shows I've gone on and shared that much with, and it's I got to tell you, as someone who's been working on this story for over 10 years now,
Mhm.
you know, with History Channel, with TED Talk, all those things. With
Yeah.
I think I sold 17,000 copies of my book.
Mhm.
Now I've probably come up with the undeniable piece of evidence which proves my argument was true all along,
Mhm.
and that
Yeah.
this was the most incredible piece of fraud, of con on the American criminal justice system in our entire history.
Right.
And it's going to be fun to watch the reactions that I get from the big players that were involved
Mhm.
about how they're going to share that with the American people.
Exactly. And how are some of these people going to backtrack that, even after you guys started investigating, we're like, oh, no, no, it's Holmes. It'll be fun watching them backpedal.
Well, and to be fair, they believed it was Holmes. They did,
Right.
and and it's how did a man? Of course, he was the con of all time, if you ask me, the fraud. And I'm not admiring him. It's just as you study him more and more, you realize all these coincidences that keep popping up, all these strange occurrences that pop up when you get set your mind right about the way he thought and the things he was capable of in his career. It starts changing how your outlook on the facts. And
Mhm.
I think this time we've got something that's going to it's going to be a lot of fun. And I can't wait to see. Like I say, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go
Mhm.
back to discuss it with the judge, discuss it with the church, discuss it with ABC, NBC, CBS,
Mhm.
and see if they'd like to cover me marking the grave, because I'm convinced it's not Holmes in the grave.
Right. That will be interesting to see and hear. Definitely, you need to update me in the future on what happens with that all. And I mean, I grew up just outside of Chicago, and it was always interesting to hear stories. H.H. Holmes was always something that we talked about, and you would hear the different legends and the rumors that would be sent around. But what do you think? Knowing that it's not his body, what do you think happened to him after he disappeared?
We've got I've got a team investigating that now. The family legend was that he lived in Port Costa, California, on the Sacramento River, in a little
Mhm.
bordello town. If you're listeners and you Google up Port Costa, you'll see it's a
Mhm.
fascinating place. That's right out of a Hollywood movie set. They kept all the old buildings,
Oh,
and
that's cool.
you'll quickly see, Heather, there's a little there's a little pharmacy hotel there, 3
Mhm.
stories. That's an exact almost replica for the murder castle.
Okay.
And you start wondering, wait a minute. Did he have something to do with that too? And it's going to be fun to investigate those facts. There's a lot of times we run into dead ends on the Holmes story, and I'm the first
Mhm.
to admit, no, we don't have anything there. It's like we spent years, Heather, trying to find the ship he rode over on to London.
Mhm.
Before he wrote the Dear Ross letter, and the ship he rode back on. But you
Mhm.
got to understand, this is a brilliant man, a criminal genius who used 41 different aliases in his 35-year life. And it's difficult. It's a difficult investigation, but we've got something concrete now. I keep using puns. We've got something concrete now that I'm hoping that once people see that my theory about him never being buried at Holy Cross Cemetery is true, I hope they're willing, these outfits, to take a second look at the theory about Holmes being in London and writing Dear Boss, because it's a piece of evidence that the FBI uses. It's a piece of evidence the Department of Justice uses in their cases.
Right.
And I've never, in all this time, Heather, I always bring this up on shows like yours. In all this time, I've never had anyone say, well, we just saw a piece by the post office or by the FBI or by the Department of Justice explaining how your theory that the handwriting is a near perfect match is fake, is false, doesn't work. Nobody has come up with anything like that yet. No one said that the scientists that the Department of Justice hired to create this program for them to send men to prison, men and women to prison, when they're found guilty in a criminal trial. No one's come up with how you can't use that. That's not proper evidence. Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Right.
It's direct evidence of identity. And what's fun is I'm starting to get quite a few organizations in London, Heather, that are on my side now, and they're getting very excited about the whole story. But what they're accepting now, Heather, which they never did before, which history never did before, there was never one man and 5 victims. There was a copycat involved, which at one time Scotland Yard believed. They actually sent a team of investigators over to the United States to research the possibility that an American doctor was involved. Okay. And so it's I'm excited about that, and I'm hoping that once we get the credibility established with this grave matter, that people are going to take a second look at Jack the Ripper.
Yeah. And who knows, when you're talking about his aliases, I mean, of 41, but who knows how many more he used that you guys just don't know about yet. If he was that good, he could have many more that's, not uncovered yet.
Exactly. And we found some of those aliases on passenger lists, riding the ships over at the proper times. But there's no way to establish proof of that identity.
Yeah, it's not like they had our driver's license that they have now that they scan and there's a digital record with a photo.
No cell phones, no computers, no DNA, none of that stuff. Boy, I tell you what, that's one thing that's changed my idea of forensic science. This whole thing about what does DNA give us? I think you'll enjoy this. The UPenn scientists gave a interview with their Penn Today magazine about 8 months after the show had ended, and they actually admitted that the DNA wasn't a match, and they said that they now realized that unless they'd had a sample of DNA from Holmes himself to compare with what we dug up, they would have never have been able to say from DNA, this is H.H. Holmes. And I was like shocked. I mean, do we ever hear that on television? I mean, I don't think so. No.
That's interesting, because you always hear, like second or third generations away can be used for DNA matching. So it's I've always been curious about DNA, but I'm not that into it. So, but from what I've heard, it's absolutely, the key to a lot of things.
And I'm doing you a favor coming on your show. I'd like you to do me a favor. I wrote the Redux to Bloodstains, which I've got on a website that's an ebook, and it's your listeners can have it for the price of a cup of coffee, which I'm very proud of. A McDonald's coffee, not Starbucks. and I'll probably get in trouble for saying that. But I'd love for you to take the time to read it one day. It's more like I said, more than about the H.H. Holmes story. Any show I go on now that we get an argument about how many he actually murdered, I have no idea. I have no idea how many he murdered in the basement of the murder castle, Dr. Frankenstein's chambers. I have no idea. I know there was a fire furnace down there. I know there were chemicals down there. I know he was a master in glass and concrete, all those things. He had worked with an undertaker to pay for his medical school tuition at the University of Michigan, handling bodies and organs, things like that, which was his hobby, his favorite. But so, all those things that make him the ultimate strange human being, I don't think anybody would argue. But as far as how many he murdered, a lot of people want to say 9. We've only proven 9, 13. He wrote about admitting 27, which the great historians now have gone back and found out 3 or 4 of those were still living after. So he was lying there. He was a great liar, pathological liar. That's why whenever you do any research about him, anything that's about what a quote he made or said in court or one of those things, I get a kick out of some of these authors. They want to write about what he said to prove their case, and in the next sentence they'll say he was the greatest pathological liar that ever lived. Well, you can't have it both ways. So so it's, I get a kick out of that. And then of course the Devil in the White City author about Holmes having possibly killed 200. I doubt it. I doubt it.
Yeah.
That murder castle, I can't believe someone in Hollywood hasn't jumped on that story yet. 2 miles down the road with the rail lines right next to it, from the World's Fair, from the Chicago World's Fair, attended by millions, hundreds of thousands who needed a place to stay for those nights they were there. And right down the road, walking distance, was H.H. Holmes in the murder castle. So and the Chicago police admit now many went missing they have never identified.
Yeah, it was the perfect location for him. And I'm bummed that it got burned down. It burned, right? And
it didn't burn down. That was one of the, but it burned a lot.
Okay.
And then it was remodeled, put back up. And then, of course, the post office bought it. And took it down, tore it down, and then put a United States post office over the top, which always puzzled me. There are federal laws about building on a crime scene, building on the site of an unidentified homicide. And it's whenever I bring that up, I've been down in that basement, the post office basement, twice. I write about it in my book. How the first time, when it was an abandoned basement, boxed up the door, and the employees at the post office wouldn't go down. They believed it haunted. And when we went down fighting through a Brazilian jungle full of spider webs, it was spooky, and then going through the eerie dark hallways and tunnels that were still down there. The post office sits adjacent to where the murder castle was. There's a small overlap where the walls to each side were, so you could touch the wall of the post office, which was in the next door with the murder castle, but it was all gone. And if anyone wants to visit there now, the murder castle, there's a small grass portion to the plot next to the post office, which sits where the castle was. But it was, and then I went back down with History Channel on haunted history, and trying to record some of the eerie feelings I felt down there the first time. I'd never been spiritual, I'd never been paranormal, but I write about in the book how that was definitely a different feeling down in that basement in the post office. And I was going to ask you, it might just be me being scared. It might just me, I'm epileptic. It might just me be fighting off having a seizure down in the basement and feeling those strange instincts and urges. But I tried capturing them in the book. I'd love to hear what you think about them one day if you ever get the chance.
Yes, I'll definitely. I have it on my list of things to read, and I just wrote down the Redux of Bloodstains as well. I'll definitely check that out and let you know what I think. But you gave me the perfect segue into what I wanted to talk about too today, is with the paranormal activity or any strange feelings. That could have been 100 different things. It could have been, spirits could have been down there, which is possible where it's at. But it could also have been, you knowing what happened on the site. Could have been almost like your mind playing tricks on you, because that's the one thing with the paranormal is you don't know if it's actual paranormal activity or if it's self-manifested. So it's kind of locations that, I mean, I wish that Murder Castle was still up, because I would love to get in there and do a thorough investigation of it.
Oh, every paranormal expert in the world would. I continue to believe, Heather, that I know the Ghost Adventurers tried to get inside, and then they were turned down by the post office. And I would imagine that I would like one of the real professional, serious ghost hunting groups to get permission to go back down, and I could help them get that. And then I'd go down there with them with the proper equipment to record something if it happened. Because my neurologist, I had a couple of terrible seizures involving Herman. He actually dialogue with him in my seizures. Now, my neurologist assured me that was just a normal epileptic seizure, that I could have manifested those dialogues myself. I kind of figured they were different. The one thing they've never been able to explain to me is why all of a sudden at 40 I developed epilepsy. I've never had an answer to that question. But and that's when I found out who I was, when my grandfather admitted the truth to the family. So I'd love to go back down into that basement with a professional team. And possibly see if we can get that recreated, those feelings I had, because I'm convinced, and I'll probably get in trouble for this one too. I'm convinced that may be the place where the paranormal, where the spirit, where ghosts are proven. Down in that basement. And it's going to be exciting to give it a try, but I won't ever go back down there again with someone who just wants to do a TV show.
Right.
This has got to be about science. This has got to be about discovering an amazing piece of, I guess somebody told me once, there's 150 million Americans who believe in the spirit world in some way or another.
Yep. Yeah.
So billions around the world. And this is worth a try. And 99% it probably comes out zero, but that one shot, we should give it a try.
Yep. Yeah. I'll definitely have to stay in touch with you after this interview, because that's my whole purpose. My degree is in paranormal science, and I'm doing everything to, different research to prove that ghosts really do exist. In my mind, I know they do, but it's getting that proof. And then also, I know it's a far shot, but I'm working on mass spectrometers to try to come up with the composition of ghosts. Because we know like EMF fields increase, but does nitrogen increase, or does the oxygen increase in the room? And that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Well, you have to stay in touch, because that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for going down into that basement again, and preparing myself, not taking my medicine, all those things, but preparing myself for someone like you that wants to discover what the greatest discovery in mankind's history.
Exactly. And I truly believe paranormal is not a pseudoscience like everyone else says. I take this as an actual science, and that's what my ultimate goal.
I'll tell you another example why I knew it wasn't Holmes that we had dug up. Once the body was removed and taken back to the University of Pennsylvania laboratories, which is an amazing facility. Amazing. We had their medical department, we had their dental department, we had their museum, we had every scientist they had working on this project for truth, for fact, and for history. It was a great project. And there was we were there filming, and we were all upstairs taking a break up in the cafeteria. And I'd had always been fascinated, Heather, about the Shakespeare piece about holding the skull in the hand
Right.
and talking to his ancestor. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's the kind of person I am. That had always fascinated me. And that's why people ask me, why are you so obsessed with this terrible man? And I said, I don't know, but that's the
Mm-hmm.
truth. That's the truth. So I snuck away from the luncheon, went down into the lab, left the lights off down at the table, went over to the table, picked the skull up in my hand and talked to him, stared in those evil eye sockets,
Mm-hmm.
which if anyone goes to my Bloodstains Facebook page, you'll see pictures of the skull.
Mm-hmm.
Incredible images that the scientists put up with the teeth. And I talked to him, seeing if maybe we could recreate that Hamlet scene.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to do that since the first day I'd asked history to, fund this project, spend the millions they spent.
Yeah.
And nothing, absolutely nothing. No eerie feeling, no spook, no electricity, no static charge, nothing, no dialogue, no voice, no seizure on my part, none of those things. And I came away, besides being in terrible trouble with the scientists because they thought I might have contaminated their DNA sample with my hand. I didn't, but they were right. I shouldn't have picked it up. I could have dropped it, but nothing. And I've always pondered that possibility. And when I came out that day, I knew it wasn't him. I knew there was something there missing that should have happened based on what I'd felt down in that post office basement that one day. So, it's that's kind of turned me paranormal, spiritual. It turned me like I say, the believing there is a possibility, no matter how small,
Right.
of a great discovery one day, and I'd love to be part of it.
Yes. Yeah. It's there, but it's just needing, someone to find the right research method to do it. Because right now everybody's so focused on doing the same thing over and over. And that's why, I host another show called Ghost Education 101. And my co-host and I, we're actually dedicated to training, new investigators on different techniques and kind of moving the field forward, not just staying stagnant like it has been for so many years.
Good. I'm if we ever get the chance, I'm going to insist it's with someone not interested in television ratings, that it's someone interested in finding out that thing that all you paranormal experts have been looking for decades.
Yes.
Centuries.
We need to get back to that in the field. And then one more question before I let you go is, I know you didn't feel anything with that skull, but have you ever felt that maybe H.H. Holmes was around you at any time?
Yeah, I write about it in the book. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I should have read the book before I put you on, but
he and I talk, which as I explained to your listeners, they can think I'm crazy, or they can think what my neurologist explained was just a normal happenstance of an epileptic seizure. And but like I said, they never explained that ultimate question I had for them: why at 40 did I develop epilepsy? That's just not done. It doesn't happen. And so it's I'd love to go down, like I said, back in that basement and actually have a controllable seizure where we see if something comes up.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And monitor brain waves as well.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. It looks like I found the right one. You're awesome.
Yeah. I love the different things. I mean, I've even brought a blood pressure cuff with me on investigations to see if, there's changes in blood pressure and O2 levels in our personal bodies. So I'm always about the more, I like the non-tech tools because they're fun to play with, but I also like digging into the science behind things.
I'm hoping someone's listening to your show, someone with I get so many hits now on Facebook and shares and things. I know that sooner or later, one of the one of the important people are going to want to do something more with this now. But it's exciting. It's exciting to think that there would be a network or a production crew that has the same interests that you do.
Yeah.
And would want to do a documentary on an actual exploration, on actual potential discovery, not just I don't want to make fun of any of the stuff that I see on television now with paranormal, but I've seen enough lights up. I've seen enough lights up upstairs closets and abandoned buildings. You know, I need to see something more, and I think this may be the chance. It'd be fun to try.
Exactly. And I totally get where you're coming from, because I actually was on Zach's show a couple months ago. And then we also did work with a documentary film crew, but it was more of the history behind the paranormal, not the scientific end. So yeah, the scientific end is something that I think really needs to be promoted a little bit more.
I think there's people out there that would jump at the chance to watch us give it an honest try. Yeah.
Exactly.
I was on Zach's show a few years ago too, and they were a good team to work with, good crew, and Zach was fun. That was back when he was traveling, and it was in Indiana where Holmes spent some time and actually murdered a little boy. Yeah, and so it was a good scary show, and but we'll see. It's I got my fingers crossed. I think one day it might happen.
Yep, so, exactly. I'll keep them crossed right there with you, because I truly do believe that it can happen. It's funny that you talk about, the exploration of, the paranormal field and the science field. My actual paranormal team is my husband, my son, and myself. And the team name is Exploration Paranormal.
Heather, can you imagine being your husband, and your son being the team that actually proves another realm?
Yes. That would be my dream come true.
How about a Pulitzer Prize? Prize?
Exactly. Yeah. Yep, definitely. And but I do want to thank you for coming on. Just checking to see we haven't had any questions, but that's okay. They'll ask questions later, and I'll make sure I send them to you if I don't know the answer, if it wasn't answered during the show. But
a lot of people have been skeptics and doubters for a long time on my theory. Yep. But when we reveal and divulge this new evidence that I'm convinced would win a court case, that's undeniable, they're going to have to change their minds. They're going to have to look at things differently. And I'm hoping that, like we discussed earlier, they're going to give a couple of my earlier theories a new look. And because I didn't fudge those either. Those were based on good courtroom rules of law evidence, and it's going to be fun to see the world react to realizing those were true, those were the facts, and it's going to be fun.
Yep, exactly. Looking forward to whatever else you have coming out. And what is the title of your book again, so the listeners can look it up?
Well, you know what? My website designer's working on it today. It might be up right now. It's called Bloodstains Redux. Okay. It's not in print anymore. It's an ebook. Okay. And it's a push a button and you download in 2 minutes. And like I said, it's the price of a cup of McDonald's. I'm more like you on this than trying to make money. I want to show the world something that I think needs to be done. And I wanted to just make it to cover my costs. So it's $1.29 to download the ebook. Okay. And then you can take a look, and if you don't like it, I tell everyone just delete it. Just delete it.
Perfect. And I will definitely be checking that out and staying in touch with you. It was great chatting with you. Thank you again for taking time out of your day to talk to me. I'm glad we were able to finally make this happen.
All right. Give me the link when you get it all edited up and ready to go, and I'll post it on my page too.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for watching. We will see you next time on Exploring the Paranormal.